moving forward from Tuesday and slightly going back, we have the MMA Mondays, which is the macro analytics. So Pepe and myself went through the BNB chain. Bringing that together, we also had the WWF, which is the whale wallet findings. So where Sloth and I went over the BNB token specifically. And then on Thursdays, we have the Token Audit Thursdays, where Tro and Sloth went over the BNB blockchain and the evolution as a whole. So a big connection of BNB, the BNB chain and the BNB token, and sort of looking at it as what we've termed the past in terms of the MMA, looking at what it's done, looking at the token right now, and then sort of the future and the evolution going forward. So we're trying to cover all aspects there. So over to you guys. How was it with this week with BNB?
All right, so this week, like G said, we focused on BNB, and there's a lot of stuff to unpack about BNB, just in a macro sense, like what's been going on over the years. I think the best place to start is with back in Q1 of 2022, Binance rebranded from Binance Smart Chain to BNB Chain, and I mean, they don't really specify why they did that. They just say that they want to become more decentralized. And that's very, I mean, in the crypto space, I think this is a really big sticking point for people. I got into it actually with this guy, Adam Cochran on Twitter, who legitimately, yeah, I don't know. I'll leave it there. Not very, well thought out, but he essentially on Twitter yesterday was saying that BNB is going to go down when Binance goes down, but BNB is definitely leveling themselves up, moving towards decentralization. I mean, they went from like 21 validators to 41, which is a joke if we compare that to the market cap of Ethereum. If we compare both market caps, right? Ethereum's over a 6x from BNB. But in terms of the validator count, Ethereum has over 400,000 validators running right now, if my numbers are correct. And so with 41 validators, they should be over 100,000 validators on BNB to be, relatively decentralized like Ethereum. But the whole, decentralization thing is really a meme. And you have to understand that it's decentralization is more of a gradient, okay? It's not so much like black and white, like it is or it's not decentralized. It's just that like some protocols and some platforms have a certain level of decentralization more so than others, right? And even in relation to itself, a certain protocol or platform could at one time be more decentralized or less decentralized, right? That's the way that I like to look at it, because I think that that's the most rational approach. And as such, we can see that BNB is attempting to be more decentralized. They're trying to be more transparent. They're trying to break away from Binance, which is where obviously they started. Excuse me. One thing to note is that they still are tied to Binance, okay? It's not so much, I wouldn't say that Binance runs them, but they are fundamentally, oh, perfect, yeah. Trill said something about visualizing the network to come, so we'll talk about that in a minute. But it's important to note that Binance and BNB are still tied together, not necessarily in terms of control or how the network works or things like of that nature, right? Or maybe even in terms of development, but in terms specifically of how the BNB burn works, right? So from my understanding, BNB they created the coin, and just like in all of crypto, it's a massive meme, this whole burn thing, buy back and burn, buy back and burn. Oh, it's bullish. It's not really bullish, okay? We saw that with, it can be, right? Maybe in the interim or in the short term, maybe even the medium term. But the problem with buybacks and burns fundamentally is that it doesn't lend to good usability of the token. So let's say, for example, that gas fees stay the same over time. If the token hits a certain, financial or like market price, right? Is it going to be easy to transact when I have like $30 of USDC or $100 or even $1,000 of USDC, and I have to pay $50 to transact that on the chain? That just doesn't make any sense in terms of usability, right? So burning tokens, it's good for it can be good for the price, but for the functionality and usability of the platform, it's typically a bad thing in the long term. We've seen that fundamentally for those of us who have been in the space long enough with Strong Block, right, where they had Strong token and they had to introduce a second token, Stronger, that was controlled inflation because they couldn't pay out the rewards to make the platform work because they burned. I mean, I think Sloth or somebody can remind me, but I think it was like over 97. I think it was 96 or 97% of the supply, right? So essentially the tokenomics took a massive hit. Anyway, the bigger fundamental issue, right, with BNB being tied to Binance is that prior to the 15th burn, where they changed the white paper, right, and they kind of did it in a slick way, they didn't really tell anybody. But if you go through, our web archives and stuff like that, you can find that, like, the differences of the white paper is that they were using Binance profits. I think it was 20% of Binance profits to run this buyback and burn. Okay. And I think it was the 15th burn where this changed. Okay. Now what happens is it's in relation to trading fees and like on Binance. So if we understand what's happening in more of a macro, and I can get into that a little bit more in FA Friday section, but if we understand what that means for BNB, it is, where I didn't necessarily agree with O'Breezy at first. We had that conversation, and he's like, BNB is a security, this, that, and the other, right? And I was like, I don't think it is. The more that I did the research on this report, I'm like, yeah, I can see how it's a security, or at least definitely has elements of security, because it's similar to a stock buyback, right? A shareholder buyback where they're buying, like, let's say Google's like, we're going to buy, X amount of because of our, revenue, we're going to buy it back, and it pumps the price in the market, which is a thing that you can do with securities, right? It's totally acceptable. But when you have that functionality coming from a company, right, and then they have this supposedly decentralized token, or a token that's moving to be decentralized, which in my view it is, it has a long way to go, but it's moving in that direction. If a company is doing the buyback and burn based on initially 20% of the profit and now trading fees, that's a direct relationship with how well the company is being run, right? So hopefully that makes sense, and I'll explain even further in this securities issue that we're seeing with SEC in ongoing federal case. Excuse me. The federal cases with Coinbase and Binance, okay? And we should note that BNB is not listed on Coinbase, right? So that should tell you something. I think other than that, before I hand it off to Sloth and Trill and G for the on-chain data, it's important to note that in Q1 of this year, 73% of rug pulls happen on BNB, and any of us in crypto know that. You know what I mean? It's expected. I didn't realize it was that high, right? But 73% of rug pulls in the space happen on BNB, right? So they are, it's another good thing that they're working on is if we go to dappe.bnbchain.org, they've started updating various protocols regularly. So weekly, they update these protocols so we can see this is a significant risk, and it'll give a little bit of a background as to why it's a red alert, red alarm alert, and then it breaks it into like what's going on with the protocol, that type of thing. So they're moving in the in the right direction. I think in terms of security, in terms of these other elements where, and if you scroll to the bottom, you can see it. Well, let me go to the front page so I can show you. It's a little bit easier. But yeah, I mean, you can see the list of, while it's loading, you can see the list where it's saying all these different protocols and projects, and they have certain risk associated with them. But yeah, they have the risk scanner, the red alert or the red alarm alerts down here, and you can submit your DAB for evaluation on here. So it's a pretty good resource if you're playing on BNB. I personally am not on there too much. I have some injective protocol tokens on BNB, but yeah, and like Skylar says, I definitely agree. They are moving towards decentralization, but just not that quickly. I think that's the best way to say it. So I'll hand it off to the next guys.
Thanks for that, Pepe. Yeah, so Josh, you want to go over the analytics for WWF?
Yeah, sure. Just give me a second here. I got Nansen pulled up so we can go over the analytics stuff. All right, so this is just looking at the Nansen dashboard for the wrapped BNB coin on the BNB chain. So this kind of goes over the overview of the token price and volume, basically since launch. So yeah, since the initial ICO, I think it was offered at 10 cents a coin, and then hit all the way up to I think over almost $700 at the peak market, and then it's sitting at 235 right now. And this just shows the weekly trades per DEX, and we see obviously Pancake Swap has the majority of the trading liquidity, since Pancake Swap's the main DEX on the BNB chain. So we can see here the liquidity pools and the corresponding TVL. So we've got the buy swap liquidity pool with over 2 billion with the wrapped BNB and Thorium token, and then the rest are all just random Pancake Swap liquidity pools with different ones. We got the BNB with Baby Doge and a bunch of the random ones, USDT, BNB, Cake, which is the native Pancake Swap token. And then if we go over here, we see the token distribution, so we can see majority of the tokens is showing about 81% of the tokens are currently traded on the decentralized exchanges, and the top balances being pretty much mostly Pancake Swap liquidity pools. I've got another one here for Alpaca Finance. So Alpaca Finance is basically like a cross-chain platform for yield farming. So you could see here, you could actually do leverage yield farming on the platform here. So if we look at, so they've got over 142 on the Alpaca Finance V1, and then another 25 million on Alpaca Finance V2. So these are some of the lending pools. So what you can do is you can deposit here and then basically lend out your tokens for APY. So you lock them for a certain amount of time and then lend it out for higher yield. And then and then these are just the showing the balance changes in the past week from different addresses. Again, most of them are liquidity pools. We see a few whale wallets as well, trading in and out of it. And then here's a few of the whale wallets I had pulled up. So there's one here. They've got about $21 million worth of tokens, and majority of it being on the BNB chain, with majority of it being the BUSD, which is the Binance stable coin, and then about $5 million worth of wrapped BNB. And then I got another one here. We've got a little over $7 million, with majority of it being BNB. And then a few more analytics I want to go over. Sorry. So this is just going over the social analytics. So the social dominant here is basically the percentage that ticker is being mentioned on socials in comparison to other crypto tickers. So we see obviously a big spike here beginning of June when a lot of the Binance FUD was going on. And then the social volume is how many times it was mentioned in a particular article, whether it was Reddit or Twitter or another news article. And then we see a big drop off, obviously, in the past month. And then this is just showing the overall holders over time. So this is looking at just the past since the beginning of the year. And then if we go here all time, then we can see a bigger increase here. So obviously, beginning of 2021, kind of when the bull market picked up, end of 2020 and beginning of 2021 is when we saw the big spike up. That's kind of when people were going on, Pancake Swap and DeFi was a big thing over there. And then here, this is just looking at the token supply distribution. So see a pretty big imbalance. I think we calculated it was about 95% of the wallets holding BNB had about less than 5% of the supply, which is a pretty big imbalance. So basically, there's just a few wallets holding majority of the supply. So it's definitely something to take into consideration and kind of further points to the narrative of the centralization of the BNB token. And yeah, that's pretty much all I want to cover for the data analytics section.
Thanks for that, Scott. I think, yeah, just to reiterate what you're saying, it's important to see the sort of two of them play in, because what happens is you see bits of FUD or you see people talking about stuff and it's just momentary hype. There'll be a bunch of people throwing in some stuff on the socials, and this is happening, that's happening, then it goes quiet again. And it's always good to see the bigger picture and see that these are just small blips, and in the long run, whether you have a bag or you're looking to invest, it still plays in. So looking forward with that. Trill, how's the evolution of the blockchain?
Yeah, I'll go over history and as well as evolution. Before I share my screen, just go over some key points. I believe Pepe already stated, but Binance was founded in 2017, and at first it was only the Beacon chain, and afterwards they did create the Binance Smart Chain, and now they have a few like layer 2 solutions as well as a programmable layer that they're working on that I'll go over with the screenshot. But yeah, Binance started in 2017 with an ICO, and their current, or the chain that they started with, instead of building upon that chain because it wasn't Ethereum compatible, they ended up deploying an entirely new chain, which was the Binance Smart Chain. And instead of also foregoing the older chain, they used the older chain for part of the consensus for the newer chain. Oh, on my screen. All right, so what Binance or BNB will or plans to become is or what the chain plans to technically become is this. So what we have is the BNB Beacon chain, which is the first chain that was not EVM compatible. Now this is where the validators reside, and just a staking and governance layer. Someone did mention the BNB that they're working on, which is using Optimism rollup technologies for off-chain validation and faster transaction finality. It uses optimism technology. If you understand as well how optimism works with the fraud proof, kind of by the name optimism, by the belief that more people are not going to be the bad actors, and that's kind of how the optimism technology works. There is a previous post about that as well if you want to learn a little bit more. And then we have the ZK BNB, which is also another form of roll-up technology, similar to the OP BNB, off-chain validation and not necessarily off-chain, but layer 2 validation, and then that is pushed up to the mainnet. And the greenfield is a little bit interesting because it's a programmable layer to the smart chain in which people would be able to have control over the assets on the chain. So it's like you can kind of like write what you would want to allow to that type of data that's stored on that particular chain. Like it's not, fully fleshed out. Actually, OP, BNB, and BNB Greenfield, I don't believe are fully fleshed out. But
Yeah, it's in the testnet stages. Actually, I can talk a little bit more about Greenfield once you're done too.
Yeah. I mean, if you want to follow them, there's these docs, and like I said, or as you can see, they're living documents, so they are changing over time. But those are at least how optimism. I said how BNB is planning to evolve over time with their current technology. So they did have the one chain, and instead of evolving that chain, they just created a whole entirely new chain, and they used the previous chain for part of the consensus of the new chain. And part of the issue with BNB is, as they stated, they're one of the biggest exchanges. So the scalability, as we know in crypto, is kind of an issue. So these layer 2 solutions are supposed to address those issues of scalability. And Soft will go over more, but Greenfield is allow more developer and control over your assets. But I'll let Soft take over from there.
Yeah, let me share my screen again real quick. Just go over Greenfield. So this is the main page. So you can actually come here and use the testnet if you wanted to test it out for yourself. You can go ahead and, there's documentation, and then you can go ahead and play around with it. And then here's the documentation for the DApp, which is called a Dceller. So basically what it is, it's an app. So here's the UI. It's basically just a application you can use to create what's called buckets, or it's basically just like a folder to store files. So it works just like any Web3 dApp, right? You connect your wallet here, and then you would basically have to fill it with some BNB, or you can use they have a testnet faucet. You can get some test tokens, and then basically you can come here, create a bucket or a folder, and then you can go ahead and start uploading documents. And it works kind of similar to if you ever use any like cloud providers, such as like AWS or Azure. So AWS has what's called S3 buckets. So it's basically just a application to store files and data. So it's pretty much the same concept, except right, you're not signing up with an account. You're just connecting your wallet, and then you can upload files as you need to. So you have complete control over what you do here. So it's pretty cool. And I haven't really tested it out too much, but I'm planning on here just to kind of play around with it and see how it works. So yeah, I just wanted to show that.
Well, I think that was great analysis across the three, and it's interesting to see how the analytics, the micro, the macro, and the audits all sort of play into that. So hopefully that was some good information for everyone around the BNB chain as a whole. We looking at some questions. Does anyone have any questions so far?
I did have one question. You guys knocked it out of the park today. I had a few questions around the auto burn, but I think what Pepe said and what Sloth said, kind of pulling it together, really explained that. As far as the market's response to BNB's chain strategy of controlling token supply through these auto burns. Like Pepe said, the burning tokens has always had, I guess, in the past, not been actually a process that has helped anything, but instead was more of a hype mechanism. So just kind of curious, as new investors come into the space, is that something that they should definitely be keeping an eye on? And I noticed you said in that article that they didn't really come out and announce it either. Is that something that investors should look out for? This is probably a question for Pepe.
Yeah, I mean, that's for me, how I've done so well in crypto, at least thus far, is not so much like trading or on the hype side and stuff like that, but it's actually understanding what is hype versus what is sustainability. You know what I mean? And for me, I have recognized that there are issues with the whole idea of a burn of supply, right? It can be good. Usually I haven't seen that it is good, right? There needs to be a reason for the burn other than we printed X amount of tokens and we want to reduce that by X. You know what I mean? Or Y, excuse me. So yeah, I mean, it's to me, it's more of it's a hype factor. You know what I mean? Where it's like, oh man, I better buy because they're gonna do a burn over time, so my bags are gonna pump. You know what I mean? That's generally the purpose of it. There's not really another purpose in my view of it, at least. So yeah, that's what I would say. Hopefully that answered the question.
Yeah, and Ju just popped in, is the ETH burn design flawed? That's what I'm kind of wondering. Like, is this mechanism, does it make sense? What are the real reasons they're doing it, and then how they put it out there too for investors? It just always seems a little bit backwards to me.
Yeah, I mean, to answer in my view, Ju, I would say that I don't see the purpose for the burn on Ethereum other than just to make the numbers appear good, right? But like if we burn hypothetical, if we burn all of it out of the supply, then how do you use it, right? Or if we burn a bunch of it out of the supply, then like how is it going to be a functional platform? You know what I mean? To use for dApps when you have to pay all this money. And my biggest criticism with Ethereum is that they're focused on the wrong things, in my view, right? They're like, well, we went to proof of stake. Okay, did that fix the fundamental problem of gas GUI being through the roof? You know what I mean? When Pepe coin is trending, like it's absurd. You know what I mean? In my view. So I just don't see why projects focus on burns other than like when they could be taking that effort and put it into real development that produces substantial results in terms of functionality. Hopefully that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. And it kind of actually opens up a second question I had, and this might be more on Trill side with the token audit. So CZ, I mean, he's been in the space for a really long time, and Binance does have a lot of successful factors. But in contrast, those key decisions that are made, like these auto burns, and then also opening up this blockchain evolution on the BNB side, how do you balance, or like, are they spending the correct amount of focus on the intended benefits and potential, possibilities with the introduction of BNB Greenfield? Are they going to be able to pull it off, or are they just kind of pushing stuff out there without actually taking the time and making sure that it gets developed?
I think that's an interesting question because I mean they do have a couple things in development right now that's aren't fully fleshed out, and like you obviously don't want to just be coming up with new ideas to address hype and address ideas that have to be addressed but not addressing them effectively. As far as like what, or how that technology will actually end up, I'm not the one who's working on it, so I can't necessarily say how efficient Greenfield will actually end up becoming because they're also still working on changing it. I feel like part of the well, I mean, it's good to get testers of your software before you deploy it, especially when it comes to like blockchain technology and smart contracts. Smart contracts, they're final, so once they're deployed, you aren't necessarily able to edit that smart contract. So you do want to get as much testing and things as possible before add before you make public software. At the same time, yeah, that is like a good point. Like, what is like the viability of like all the additions and stuff they're making, but it's also kind of hard to say without any concrete information from them, because they're also kind of asking the community to help find out the viability of the technology that they're even proposing.
Cool. Thanks for that, Trill. And thanks, Pepe, for your answers as well. Looks like team's having a bit of technical issues, but all good. I think, yeah, we'll wrap it up there for that section. So thank you for Trill, thank you, Pepe, and thank you, Sloth, for your work and your reporting there.